If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of three. Inside my online program, Fitness Mama, I just love helping support women to care for their bodies during pregnancy, prepare their bodies for birth, and support their after-birth recovery, helping them feel confident and strong inside out during this important stage of their lives. In this podcast, join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth, and postnatal recovery, helping you through every step of the journey. It is absolutely possible to feel amazing and confident in our bodies during this motherhood journey, and I want that for you. Come and say hi to me on Instagram at @fitnessmama, and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the Fitness Mama podcast. Today, we are exploring the topic of creating a calm birth environment. No matter if you were planning a home birth, a hospital birth, caesarean, or a vaginal birth. So joining me today is Claire Fulton, a childbirth educator, founder of the Nurture Nest and the Hypnobirthing podcast. And today we'll be discussing with Claire some amazing ways to help create a calm birth environment. She has some tips for birth partners, really practical tips, as I said, where you give birth or how you give birth. And I really do trust that you will find this episode really valuable, especially if you are pregnant. And if you are not pregnant, don't forget to share it with your pregnant friends who you think might benefit from listening. Before we do dive into this episode, I just want to thank you all for listening. It's now nearly over 2.5 years old, this podcast, and we have released over 130 episodes, and this podcast has now been listened to in more than 90 countries around the world. So thank you for your support and for sharing this with your pregnant friends and your new mum friends too. Thanks for all the ratings and reviews this podcast has received. It's really the sharing, the rating, and the reviewing these are probably the most important ways to help this podcast reach more people. And at the end of the day, if I can help one more pregnant or postnatal mama have a wonderful motherhood experience, then I'm happy. Right, on that note, thanks again. Let's dive into this episode with Claire. Claire, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's great to chat all about how to create a calm birth environment. And I think this is such a great topic because I think it's probably one of the number one things people worry about, being stressed or being anxious. And so let's start off. What are some of the common causes of stress? Like why is labour so stressful, and why is it so important to have a calm birth environment?
Oh, firstly, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to come on as a guest. I always enjoy being a guest. So I think one of the main concerns that people have and that, we should have really when it comes to giving birth is that you want to try and remain in your kind of calm nervous system. So we have two different nervous systems. So the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. And one is our fight or flight mode and the other one is our calm response. And the best place you can be during your labour is in your calm response, because when you're in that mode, when you're in that response, your body is relaxed, you feel calm, you feel safe. And what that does is that allows your body to do what it needs to do. To give birth effectively and efficiently. The problem that we have is that many people fear birth, and that's completely normal. We grow up in a society where the narrative around childbirth is typically that it's scary and painful or dangerous or something like that. So we sort of intrinsically have this fear around giving birth, which I think starts actually at quite a young age. And so by the time we get to an age where we are having babies, it's quite ingrained in us. So many people actually find themselves in their fight or flight mode during their labour, which when you're in that mode, you are releasing adrenaline. Your body is trying to survive. That's what the body does in fight or flight. It doesn't realize that actually it's perfectly safe. It's being told, hey, this feels dangerous, so I'm gonna protect myself. And that just means that your body doesn't work quite as effectively as it should do, because your body's too busy concentrating on trying to keep you alive and trying to, keep you able to survive. So that's one of the big problems that people have. And obviously, environment can make a massive difference to that. If you can create an environment for yourself that feels calm, that feels safe, that's going to have a massive impact on how you then feel during your labour. If you are in quite a stressful labour environment, then of course your body's going to respond to that in a very stressful way, and you're going to most probably find it more difficult to get into your parasympathetic nervous system.
So what you touch on there, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because what one person, I'm guessing here, what one person finds quite a relaxing, calm birth environment, someone else might think the opposite. Is that right?
It is to an extent, I guess, but there are definitely things that will help everybody feel more relaxed. So typically we are at our most relaxed and most comfortable when we are at home, right? I think everybody could probably agree with that. When you're at home in the evening, chilling out, you feel safe, you're not on high alert, you're comfortable, you have familiar smells around you, you have familiar noises. So I think for most people, they would feel most comfortable in that sort of situation. That's not to say that you have to give birth at home. That just means that even if you are going into a hospital setting or a midwife-led setting, it's really important to try to create a very similar type of environment to what you would have at home. So you can do that quite easily. And I'll talk about this when I talk through some of the tips for creating a calm environment. But things like sounds and smells, if you can sort of plan beforehand how you're going to incorporate those things into your birth space, then that can have a massive impact again on how comfortable you feel. But you're right with what you say, that some people, the idea of actually being at home and giving birth at home feels quite stressful to people. So although there is a lot of great evidence that supports home birth, and it is actually, a very, very safe option for most women. That's great. If you know that you're going to feel really comfortable at home and that's best for you, then that is probably the best space for you. But for some people, they just know that actually, even though I understand all the pros of being at home, why it's beneficial, I know that I'm going to be a bit more stressed out than if I am in a hospital setting, in which case, yeah, of course that, that environment might not be perfect for them. But in terms of kind of, feeling comfortable, feeling safe, most people will do that at home. So mimicking those settings is really important.
Yeah. And I think you just totally nailed it then, because that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, some of us want to have a home birth and others are really scared to, and they just want to get to hospital because they feel safer in the hospital. Yeah. But what you just said is perfect in terms of, doesn't matter if you're at home or a hospital, we're going to be discussing ways to help that environment no matter where you are.
Exactly, yeah.
And this will be for both vaginal births and caesareans, correct?
Yeah. So there's definitely things with a caesarean that you can do that will help as well.
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply.
Amazing. So what are the key elements? I know there's lots, but what are the main key elements you want to talk about in terms of creating that calm birth environment?
Okay, so I have 5 things that you can do that are going to help you to create that calm space. So the first one is to keep the lights low. So artificial light is different from natural light. So if you give birth in the day, like if you go into labor during the day, don't worry, natural light is very different to the artificial bright lights that we often have in hospital settings. So if you're in a situation where it's daytime, I wouldn't worry, but what you could do is take like an eye mask with you. Because actually melatonin, which is obviously the hormone that comes out at night, it helps us relax and helps us sleep. It does only come out in the dark. And it actually helps boost the effects of oxytocin, which is the labor hormone. So that's one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people give birth at night. Like the majority of people, some people obviously do give birth during the day, but a lot of people go into labor at night, and animals as well. You see it with other mammals. They go into labor at night, and it's for that reason. The oxytocin is much higher. Typically, obviously, when it's dark, we just generally feel like we're not being watched as much and things like that. So keeping the lights low is really important. If you're at home, that's really easy to do. You can just dim your lights. You can put candles around. You could put twinkly lights and things like that in your own home. If you're going into a hospital setting or a midwife kind of led setting, you can still often dim the lights. So this is something that I would definitely check out and ask about beforehand. But a lot of hospitals, you are able to dim the lights in the room. So you can do that. You can take battery operated candles with you that you could place around the room. You can take your own twinkly lights. You could take light projectors, anything that's going to help make that space feel really calm. And light has a really big impact on that. So taking note of, the effect that artificial light can have and trying to help yourself. If you're in a situation where you're not able to dim the light, so say, for example, you're being triaged or something and you're in a ward environment, obviously you're not going to be able to dim the lights in a ward, then an eye mask would be a really great idea so that you can block out some of that light and you can just kind of focus inwards as well. In a caesarean, you may be able to ask if you can dim the lights near your head. So not obviously where they are operating, that would probably not be a good idea. But near your head, sometimes you might be able to ask for them to dim the lights, which just means that for you, that's kind of a nicer, calmer experience. And also for the baby, when the baby's born and the baby gets put onto your chest, they're also not in bright lights as well, which for them, they've never seen daylight before. They've only ever known darkness. So for them, it can be quite a shock, to come out to bright light. So you can also do that.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it from the aspect from the baby. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So imagine, you've spent 9 months, well, your whole life so far inside and having darkness, having every single need met immediately. You never feel hunger. They never feel cold. Everything is met straight away. So as soon as they're born, that's why it's quite a shock for these babies being born. I'm cold, I'm hungry, there's loud noises, there's bright lights. So these things can help. Yeah.
And when you were talking about the eye mask and all the bright lights, I was picturing a bonnet. We need like this, a labour bonnet because it'd be weird not being able to see if you have to walk around the place. But having this bonnet that
that's a
like
great idea.
Tail.
Yeah. Or sometimes I kind of suggest to people like sunglasses, although I always do laugh at the idea of sunglasses because you might feel like, you're a bit of a superstar. But that could also work because obviously they do dim the brightness of things and you can still then see. So you could always opt for sunglasses if that would work as well. But an eye mask, I think, is quite a great idea because and you can get lovely ones that are like heated or like scented, like lavender. So you could really kind of make the most of that as well. So the second thing that I would say is to keep voices quiet. So this is quite a big one because, having somebody in your space who is loud or talking a lot is very off-putting, because what you're trying to do is remain in that calm space. So if you're constantly listening to people talking, then you're going to be concentrating on that, and your mind, the kind of thinking part of your brain, is going to be active, and you want that to be asleep basically during your labor. So quiet, hushed voices. You are also able to ask your midwife, your caregiver, to please respect that as well. Sometimes people feel a bit nervous about asking for things like that. You know, they do feel like they're being too demanding, but it is important. And for many caregivers who have witnessed and supported hypnobirthing before, they will be aware of the importance of that anyway, and they should be. But, you know, people knocking before they come into the room, for example, rather than just coming in the room, so that you know they're coming, and talking in nice kind of hushed tones is also really important to creating that nice calm space. One of the things I often liken it to is, imagine if you were going to go and get a massage. That's a very similar kind of environment, where if somebody was talking really loudly at you, it would not be relaxing. So trying to mimic that kind of space in terms of light, smells, is really important to creating that calm space.
And everything you're saying now, from a pelvic floor physio perspective, as soon as we've got tension in our body, we're going to have tension in the muscle, and, you know, we want our birth canal and our womb to be nice and open and soft. We don't want those pelvic floor muscles zipped up and, you know, activated at this stage. We want that release and relaxation, so that the baby can come through that birth canal uninterrupted.
Yeah.
So I think, from a pelvic floor physio perspective, that's exactly what. Yeah, that's all makes sense, doesn't it? From top to toe.
Yeah, if your body is relaxed, then every part of you is going to be relaxed. So of course that's going to completely help the process if everything's nice and relaxed when it should be. Absolutely. Okay, so the third one is music. So sound is such a massive trigger for us. You know, there's a particular song that perhaps, for example, I don't know, was played at your wedding or something like that. Every time you hear that song, it reminds you, doesn't it, of how you felt when you heard it the first time. So music can be a massive trigger in our relaxation. So throughout your pregnancy, when you are relaxing, and as part of what we teach in hypnobirthing, we teach you lots of different types of relaxation skills, and we encourage you to practice them as often as possible throughout your pregnancy. So while you're doing this, while you're doing your practice, maybe while you're practicing your breathing, I always encourage people to have a playlist, and it can be any type of music you like, really. I mean, most often people would choose a relaxing type of music. So again, think of spa type music. Many people would choose that because that is quite relaxing. But I have had people that I've taught that have had like a 90s playlist, or, you know, cheesy music or Disney songs, because that's what makes them happy. So whatever it is that floats your boat in terms of music and you want your baby to be born to, I would definitely include it in your pregnancy when you're practicing these relaxation techniques, so that you start to associate that music with feeling calm and with feeling relaxed. That then means that in your labor, you can have that with you, whether you are giving birth in your own room, and you can play it out loud, or whether you are at the start of your labor and maybe you're on a ward, you can have it on your headphones. You can also ask in caesareans for them to play music for you. So if you're quite prepared and you have it in your birth plan and things like that, often they are able to do what, play the music that you would like. And that, again, helps to create that space and create a calm space for you, because you're being triggered into your relaxation by that music. So music can have a massive effect. So while you're still pregnant, definitely think about the type of music that helps you relax or that makes you feel happy, and create a playlist, and make sure that you know where it is, make sure that you can access it if you're not on Wi-Fi, all of those really important things. Make sure you have headphones just in case, or a speaker, and everything's charged and ready to go, so that you can have that in your space as well.
And on that note of music, do you find women sometimes like to have Like you mentioned, there can be the two different types that women might have. But for the second stage of labour, when the pushing starts, do women tend to still like that relaxing music, or is that might be when women trial some more upbeat music?
They definitely could do. To be honest, no one's actually ever said that they've done that. I imagine people have, but I just, in terms of feedback that I've had, I've never heard it, but it does make sense. I have definitely had people that have said, my baby was born to their baby was born to The Lion King, or like one of the songs from The Lion King, I think. They're a really big Disney fan. So they remember that moment so clearly. But yeah, like in that second stage where you kind of need, you've got your adrenaline going at that point, that could make sense to have something perhaps a little bit more upbeat. Me personally, I had just very nice kind of relaxing music playing the whole way through. And what was really lovely, actually, I mean, I've given birth twice, but this is more relevant for my second labour because I was at home. We had this music just playing the whole time. And after my daughter was born, in those kind of hours after, when you're, just kind of having your cuddles with the baby, and then eventually, I went and had a shower and all stuff like that, the music was still playing and I didn't even really realise, because music does tend to go into the background, doesn't it? And it's only when you turn it off that you realise it's not there anymore. And it was so lovely because it just made the whole time and the whole space feel so calm. And now I still listen. Well, I mean, I don't listen to it, but if it comes onto my playlist at any point, it takes me straight back. It's such a strong trigger. Like, it takes me straight back to those feelings, even though I wasn't completely aware of it at the time. My subconscious obviously was. So it is a huge trigger. Yeah.
Yeah, music can be so powerful.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit off topic, but it was only last week I was speaking to someone and they said they just had someone into their home to redo their whole sound system. She said it was a total extravagance, but I just wanted to do it. She wanted to put on relaxing music on, like, she's got this particular soundtrack that I was asked for. I'll have to follow her up on that she puts it on and it's so quiet and you can't even tell. Like, it's that sort of soundtrack that it's relaxing, but you can't tell it's really there unless you really listen to it. And it's just playing all day. And she said it's made such a big difference to their whole house, because it's not like it's just blaring out of one speaker. It's just filtering through the whole house.
Nice.
So that was cool.
Sometimes I do that, like I don't know why, but on a Sunday, I don't know why a Sunday feels like a more relaxing day, I suppose. Sometimes I'll just put like classical music on really low, like while I'm pottering around, like making the dinner or doing something like that. But it just creates such a calming vibe throughout the house that you don't even necessarily notice it's there, that it's playing, but it just really can change your mood and calm you. So music, is something really important, and to think about it before you actually go into labour so that you are prepared and that you have that music that feels comforting and calming to you.
Yeah.
So that
was number 4, was it?
That was number 3.
Was that number 4?
That was number 3.
3, okay. 2 more to go.
So number 4 is similar, I guess, to music. It's smells or scents. So again, a huge trigger for us in how we feel. And a really great example of how triggering a smell can be is like suntan lotion. I always think, as soon as you smell suntan lotion, like, it makes me think, I mean, probably more for me because I'm in the UK, we don't get so much sun. But as soon as I smell it, I just am taken back to, being on holiday and, that feeling and the sun and all of those things. So smell can be a massive trigger as well. And similar to music, while you're still pregnant, try to incorporate some type of smell into your practice. And a very popular smell that people would use would be lavender, because it's really relaxing. It is safe to use in your pregnancy. So many people find that really, really comforting. If you don't like lavender, some people use lemon as well, because lemon also can be really relaxing smell. But there's lots of different essential oil sites where I would do a bit of research, because not all of them are safe for pregnancy. So just double check before you use any. But incorporating those smells into your practice again, so you can do that in a few ways. You can have a candle. So let's say lavender is your smell of choice. You can have a candle that you could burn while you're practicing. You could diffuse it in a mist diffuser. You could have just a little bit of essential oil sprinkled on a tissue that you could smell. You could have a pillow spray. You could have a room spray. There's so many different options. If you're having a bath, then you can put some lavender oil in the bath. So having that smell around you again while you're feeling relaxed is really important, because then when it comes to your labor, you can make sure that you have that smell in your space. Smell is so comforting as well. Like, we know the smell of our home. Lots of people, when they go for trips away, they take their pillow with them because it smells like home, and it's very comforting. So having those things in your space as well are going to really help you to feel calm. And again, in a hospital, you could take a room spray, you could take a pillow spray, you could take the essential oil with you. There's lots of different ways that you can incorporate that into that space as well. So smell is number 4.
Beautiful.
Very important. And then lastly, number 5 is to cover or remove any clocks that are in your space. Because clock watching, like, we all know that as soon as you watch the clock, time just seems to stand still. So whether you're like at work and you're just clock watching all day, or you're waiting for some cooking to be done, you just know that as soon as you start taking note of the time, things take ages. So getting rid of the clock, it's not going to make any difference to how quick your labor is going to be. It's not going to make any difference to your labor if you're aware of the time. You don't actually need to be aware of the time, you as the person giving birth. Other people can be aware of the time for you. So I always advise people to remove the clock or cover it up in some way. If you're at home, that's very simple because it's your space. You can just take the clock away. If you are in a hospital or a midwife unit, then you can maybe remove it, but you could always just take a spare muslin and chuck it over the clock. No, midwives, doctors, they all have their own clocks that they carry, don't they, on their uniform? So they don't need it. It's often slap bang opposite the bed, which is also not the most helpful space. So doing that just really helps you to relax. It helps you to take the focus off of the time. Often when you're in labor anyway, you become totally unaware of the time. Like, I experienced this, and many people say the same, that it felt like it was not that long at all. But for everybody else in the room, like, it was, your labor might have been hours, but for you just get so lost in yourself that you're not even aware of it. So it can be a thing that can really help you to relax. So that would also be another tip for creating a calm space.
And with the clock, do you include contraction timers in that?
I always encourage people to not worry too much about using them. I do, when I teach, I always say, don't worry, like, don't get too bogged down on how often your contractions are, because again, same theory, it's not going to make any difference to how fast your labor is going to go. And actually all that's doing is, if every time you have a contraction, you're pressing a button at the start and then pressing it again at the end, you're focusing a lot of your attention on that contraction. And one of the best ways to manage contraction pain, don't love using the word pain, or discomfort, is to try not to focus on it too much. We all know that if we have some form of pain in our body, if you focus on it, it makes it worse, doesn't it? So by timing them, you're kind of focusing everything on them. What I would say is, if you have your birth partner there, they could maybe be the person that keeps an eye on the time. Again, like, they don't need to sit in the corner with a stopwatch, like just keeping a very rough idea. But as the person giving birth, you often, when things get closer together, when things get more intense. So you often don't need to time it, because you'll know, hang on a minute, like, this is feeling a lot more intense. This is getting a lot closer together. Perhaps, now is the time to go to the hospital or to get somebody out to me. So of course, I teach this and I talk about it a lot, but I still do have people that I teach that say, I use this timer. So of course, all I can do is give my advice on it. If you want to use one, do, but I just wouldn't get too concerned with it, because times actually don't mean a lot either. You know, we have a guideline of how often our contractions should be, but of course they are just a guideline. They're not completely set in stone. So
and with TENS machines, a lot of them have an inbuilt contraction timer anyway. So as soon as you press that button for the TENS machine, if someone's choosing to use it, it will automatically start to time the contractions. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. TENS machines are good though. I would definitely recommend TENS machines.
I was just looking at your face thinking, do you recommend TENS machines?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I never used it. I had one for my first labour and I actually never used it. I think I forgot I had it. But they can really help, particularly with the first early part of your labour. I'd say once you're into your full-blown labour, they're probably not going to be the most helpful, but definitely that first part, they can, you know, if you're still at home or if you're travelling from home to the hospital in the car, then that, you know, they can be really helpful for that stage.
And the benefit is definitely if you put it on sooner, as you said, rather than later.
Yeah, because you're going to feel the benefit more at the beginning.
Yeah. And now you touched on this before, but I don't think I asked you this question, but how can partners or other support people be involved in helping you through this stage and helping with the calm environment?
Yeah, birth partners are essential and they really do have the ability to interrupt labour. That sounds very extreme, but a birth partner, they do have that ability. So they have to be very careful, actually, particularly in those early hours of labour. In the very start of your labour, oxytocin, which is this hormone that we need for labour, it's very fragile and it can be very easily interrupted. So what I always suggest to people is when they first go into labour, just try and carry on. Like, don't panic, don't fuss. If it's nighttime, try and go back to sleep. You might feel like you don't even need to wake your partner. Like if they're not needed in that stage, which they most likely won't be right at the start, I would leave them. And as the partner, during those early hours, I would just leave her be. Like, partners often can sometimes sort of fuss or, you know, flap around because they don't know what to do. But that is giving off a lot of adrenaline. You don't want that as the person in labour. You want to stay as calm as possible. So as a birth partner, just kind of try and carry on with your day as you were and as you would have. And when she needs you to do anything, to call the hospital, to do whatever, to hold your hand, she will tell you. So kind of leaving her alone is a great tip in that first stage. As you get further into your labour, oxytocin obviously becomes much stronger. So it's perhaps not as fragile. It is still quite fragile, but not as fragile as those first hours. So the main thing, I think, for a birth partner, whoever that might be, is that they fully understand what it is that you are trying to achieve from your birth. So if you have set your sights on a physiological birth, where, you know, wherever that might be, whether it's in a hospital or a home, and you want to try to do perhaps everything as naturally as possible, they really need to understand the reasons for that, how the body works. So firstly, if you're doing any kind of course, if you're doing like a hypnobirthing course or anything, whoever you're going to have as your birth partner, I would always recommend that they do that course with you so that they understand. Also, reading, like getting them to read around the topic of birth partners is also really important. And there are some great books. So educating themselves, you know, not just to kind of show up on the day, like, I'm sure it'll be fine. Because if you're calm and you understand the birth process, you have perfect faith in your body to be able to give birth. But if they don't, they could potentially be a negative influence for you, because if they're panicking, that's going to panic you. You need somebody with you that completely aligns and understands what you want and is there to support what you want. So whoever that is, whether it is your partner, whether you have your mum, your sister, a friend, it's really important that they also understand your goals. One of the other things for birth partners that I do teach, and I say that is quite important, is that they are able to advocate for you to a certain degree. This is quite hard and it is quite a lot to expect for, a birth partner to do. But as the birthing person, when you're giving birth, you're not able always to advocate for yourself if there's something that doesn't feel quite right for you that's happening in your environment. It's often quite hard for you to do that. So having a birth partner who understands that, the lights need to be low, so that if somebody comes in the room and turns the lights on, they are able to say, oh, excuse me, could we have the lights low? It's quite tough to be a birth partner, I think. Often I think the way birth partners are portrayed as well on television and, is they are made out to be idiots, basically. So it's not, I think as a birth partner, that's sometimes how they see their role as just a spare. They don't know how they can help, but it is a really important role. That support, having a baby is definitely like teamwork. You need both of you there. So understanding the process, understanding the science behind, what our body's doing, understanding the hormones, the muscles, all of those things is really important for the birth partner as well.
I love that. And I've just remembered, in addition to this podcast, to get your birth partner to listen to, I do actually have a whole episode where we talked just about birth partners. Right. So I'll link that in the show notes, ladies, whoever's listening.
Perfect.
Check that out. So Claire, to finish off with, do you have any more final words for pregnant women who are listening who might perhaps still be feeling a bit overwhelmed or unsure where to start?
So I think for anyone that's pregnant, the most important thing you can do in your pregnancy to prepare for your birth is to educate yourself. And sometimes I think it feels scarier to do that at first. I was talking to somebody yesterday actually about this, but I think some people approach birth as a kind of, I want to stick my head in the sand, I'd rather not know, I'm just going to see how it goes type thing. That often doesn't go the way you want it to go. Preparing and being educated and planning for the birth that you want is often the better bet. But sometimes as you're being educated on birth and the system and everything like that, it can feel a bit scary at first. It almost feels scarier at first. But as soon as you click and you understand how the body works, how those hormones work, why environment is so important, why birth partners are so important, it helps you in the best possible way for anything that might come your way during your birth. And I think, the biggest thing about childbirth is that it is unpredictable. We don't always know how it's going to go. Things do crop up that perhaps we hadn't planned for. So being as educated and as informed as possible about everything about birth. There's so many great books out there that you can read. There's great podcasts that you can listen to. Being prepared in that way means that if something like this does come about, if a change in your birth plan does happen, you feel in a position where you're able to make a really great informed choice about that. And whether that's making a choice that perhaps you hadn't planned to and that you perhaps ideally didn't want to, but at least, you understand why you're having to make that choice and why that's best for you and your baby. And that really helps in how you feel towards your birth as well. So educating yourself, reading, listening to podcasts, on YouTube, you can find loads of great positive birth videos that you can watch. Doing a hypnobirthing course, obviously, always going to say that, but it is important. Yeah. Birth prep is so important. And we often spend a lot of time and a lot of money on other things when it comes to having our baby, like, strollers and car seats and nurseries, which are all, I get it, important and exciting things to think about, but we spend often thousands on these things, and then birth prep kind of falls to the bottom of the list. But it is so important because if you have a really great positive birth experience, it really does set you up in those first few months of being a new parent. So birth prep, I would say, important. Education, reading, just studying as much as you can for birth is my tip.
Yep, love it. And on that note, where can people find you, Claire?
So I'm very active on my Instagram, which is at _nurture_nest. I post on there a lot and chat on there quite a bit. I do offer courses. So I have group Zoom courses that I offer. You can find all of the information on there, and also one-to-one courses that I hold over Zoom. I am starting to do some in-person courses, but that would obviously only be relevant for people that are near me in the UK. I also have a podcast called the Hypnobirthing Podcast. Would love for people to come and listen to that. It's just a really nice, safe space to discuss topics around childbirth. I've got some great guests on there, yourself included soon, and also some great birth stories that are told from the person's own voice. So really important to listen to as many different types of birth stories as you can. So yeah, there are the places you can find me.
Amazing. And I'll have all those links in the show notes. So thank you so much, Claire, for joining me today. I really do appreciate this amazing chat.
Thank you so much for having me.
And before I sign off, remember my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links, including how to connect with Claire at fitnessmama.com/podcast. Thank you once again for sharing this podcast with your pregnant friends or your friends who've recently had babies. Thank you for providing a rating and review if you have done so. And if you haven't, just simply head to your podcast app, scroll all the way to the bottom, and that's generally where you can just click for the rating and the review. It really does mean so much, and I appreciate your support. That's it, ladies. Have a fabulous day, and I look forward to you joining me next week for another episode of the Fitness Mama Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama Podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer, materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. I'll see you soon.